actually getting to know several other people's kids and dogs and cats all at the same time. So that's, I guess, the added benefit of doing things virtually. We have a fairly full agenda today of some things that we want to go through, primarily focused on, we have to take care of some business with our drought plan and report. And then we really want to focus today on moving forward with our outreach efforts to keep kind of the ball rolling. I sense that if we continue to delay longer, we're just going to continue to lose momentum, which I really don't want to do. And so I think we need to talk about how we move forward virtually and try to accomplish the goal that we set out to do. So with that, Wes has pulled up the agenda on your screen on things we want to go through today, and in the direction we want to head, including getting updates from folks of where we are, and then discussions on our next steps and our next schedules to move forward. So with that, unless there's any, does anybody have any initial questions or anything that they want to add to the agenda before we begin?
Welcome to WebEx. Enter your access code or meeting number followed by pound.
All right, well, hearing none, I guess at this point we'll move on into the agenda, and we have the next item on the agenda.
ID number followed by pound. If you do not.
Yeah, sure to mute if you're not speaking. That'll help everybody. Moving on to the next item, we have the approval of the drought preparedness plan update. My understanding is that the plan itself has not changed, but that the State Water Survey has updated many of the links related to that plan that was originally approved by the State Water Plan Task Force back on October 12th of 2011. And so we need to take official action to adopt and approve this updated plan. So with that, I'll maybe turn it over to the State Water Survey. Sally, I'm not sure who else you might have on staff there that would want to chat about that for a minute on what we're doing there.
I probably could talk about that because I worked with Jason Zhang and Trent Ford, and I worked on this. We had we were revamping the water surveys drought page. We're doing a lot of cleaning up. It turned out that we had like 3 different versions of our drought page, and so we went ahead and consolidated and had to realign links. Also, the report we were serving on the water survey webpage, but OWR serves it, and that should be the source of it. So we have changed all our links so the report can be obtained from the OWR site. But then we found that there were just a lot of not only our links, but links to other agencies and stuff that got broken. And so in that process, we kind of, I think Jason called Wes and said, hey, do you mind if we, repair these links and update the report? And so we went for it. And I have to admit, Jason probably did most of that. So, but that's all we really did. And we've consolidated the water surveys, drought page, and we're also revamping a secondary page that in the event we have a drought, we've outlined similar information that we've done in previous droughts so that we can activate that whenever needed to help disseminate some information as the drought task force deems. So that's all we really did.
Thank you, Laura. I guess a question I have that's not really related to approval of the link, the changes are to the links, but it seems to me that we're getting more of these kind of flash droughts that a matter of just a few days or weeks of no rain, and we get into kind of these flash drought kind of situation. Does that report go into any of that kind of impact or flashiness?
Not at this time, but it does refer to the Illinois State Climatologist page, and Trent Ford is very much very interested in dealing with flash droughts. I believe Trent the call.
Yeah, hey, this is Trent. Yeah, so our page of the state climatologist office does have some information on flash drought, specifically the 2012 flash drought. But as we're revamping the state climatologist website, flash drought is going to be a major focal point of the drought page because, as you mentioned, Lauren, that we have seen your propensity for these short-term, acute, um, uh, somewhat rapid onset drought events in recent years. And so that is something that we're focusing on with the revamping of the state climatologist website as well.
Thank you, Trent. Any other questions for the State Water Survey? All right, hearing none, I guess the easiest way would be, are there any objections to adopting and approving the updated drought preparedness and response plan?
I just wanted to be sure that you saw the chat. The Water Resource Center should be listed as Illinois Water Resource Center at WRC.
All right.
I listed our website there too for your just to connect it if that's happening.
All right, so noted. Any other comments on the drought plan? Hearing none, I guess I would say that the State Water Plan Task Force then hereby adopts and approves the updated drought preparedness and response plan. So thank you for that. All right, let's move on in the agenda. So the virtual public outreach, as I mentioned at the beginning, it was clear back in February, January, February, when we were all set to start an outreach to the public statewide in the northern part of the state, central part of the state, and the southern part of the state to present the issues that we have developed and are working on to get that number one, I guess, confirmation that we're on the right track with those issues, and then to explain to the public what we mean by those issues. And so, I'll pick on BJ and IDOT, right? So navigation, that's a pretty broad topic. What do we mean by navigation? So this outreach, what we had talked about is being able to go out and explain, well, by navigation, we mean this and this and this under that category. And then, of course, COVID came along and changed our lives. And I don't believe that, that's going away. I don't believe that we're going to be, having the opportunity to get back together in large public gatherings anytime soon. So rather than to continue to let things kind of dwindle and stay kind of in a spin mode here, I think we need to move forward virtually with virtual meeting format. We have been working with MPC, the Environmental Council, and other stakeholders who have stepped up and were willing to help develop a questionnaire that would kind of go along with any public outreach that asks those basic questions, right? Here are the 13 topic areas. Do you concur with these? Do you disagree with any of these? Is there something that you think should be added and why? And so that's what I believe what we were trying to get out of at least this first outreach effort to the public, just to get that confirmation before we started to delve in earnest into the issues under each of the topics under each of those primary issues, and coming up with developing those topics and perhaps recommendations for those topics. And so I guess first off, would offer up to the State Water Plan Task Force, are we in agreement that we should move forward in a virtual format? Any comments on that?
No, I think you're exactly right. This is BJ. I don't see anybody getting together anytime soon either. So if you want to move forward, you're going to have to do it virtually, as we are with many of our other programs within IDOT.
Definitely makes sense. And Lauren, just for clarification, this is only being made for the first round of outreach at this time. So instead of the meetings in Chicago and Carbondale and Springfield, as previously mentioned, we're just going to be holding a virtual meeting for that first round at this time, or is this, I assume we're not making the decision for all 3 rounds?
No, I think we want to make it just for the first round and then see how the world develops, right? I think our preference would always be to have that face-to-face when it's appropriate and safe. And so I guess we just, as we continue through the process and development of the plan, we'll just have to make that decision at each outreach point in the development. This would be just for this first initial outreach that we were talking about, intending to do back in March of this year. I guess I'm looking at wanting to do something probably in the mid-October timeframe. That said, I think you'll see on the agenda that we do have a point here of concerns of reaching our agricultural community in October, right? So that hits them right in the middle of harvest and a very busy time of the year for them. So as we talk about, when to hold these meetings, we need to have that in consideration as well, as those are key stakeholders who we would like to have engaged and get their feedback. And so that brings up the possibility, if we were to do it in October, do we also do something in November, particularly for that particular group of stakeholders? Or do we just try to delay till November to do it all? I know as we get into November, we get into, holidays about every single week in the month of November, at least for state government. So I guess I open that up. I was looking at potentially, that week starting maybe October 13th or the week of the 19th as possibilities, with maybe the option of holding a separate agricultural kind of related outreach session in November at some time. What are people's thoughts on that? I guess
Lauren,
I'll add while you're thinking about that. I was also thinking, the next dot point on this slide talks about will there be multiple meetings? And so that could be, we obviously can record whatever we would do, but there might be some benefit for doing that, say maybe 2 or 3 times in a particular set during whatever time period we select, to give as many folks the opportunity to be able to engage in that kind of a virtual outreach.
Lauren, I wasn't sure whether would there be a perception problem in starting these meetings when members of the agricultural community couldn't make it, and they would perceived that they weren't being included. I guess I'm just kind of wondering about maybe if November is a better time, might be best to wait until then. I'm not sure what I'm saying. I'm just trying to toss some things out.
No, I think, Lori, I mean, that's a valid point. And so I think that's why that's part of our discussion today. Those are key stakeholders and that we do want to hear from. We don't want to, give the impression that we're trying to, we've deliberately scheduled something, during their busiest time to in some way exclude them. So I'm open to that as well, and to waiting until in November. I'm not sure. Is Laura or Lauren Larkins? Are you on from the Farm Bureau? Do you have any insights that you could share?
Yeah, hi everybody. This is Lauren, other Lauren. I appreciate you guys putting this point on here, and it is. I think Laura phrased it very accurately, and that's always been my concern, which is why I have raised it a couple of times now. So I didn't know before that it was October the plan. So as soon as I found out that was your plan, that is my concern. That if it's done in October, that we won't be able to participate. Like as the Association for Farmers, we cannot get their attention during this time, and I'm just being realistic. And I do think if it's a separate effort, it's gonna be awkward to explain that. Not to mention that perception that we can't. I mean, I can't overcome that. So I think Laura is correct that is an issue. So my preference would be probably for the simplicity of the effort and the inclusion of everyone possible, maybe kind of delaying this a little bit. I mean, I'm not suggesting a significant amount of time, but if you could delay it into November, I think that would be great. I'm completely sympathetic to the state agency calendar. My husband used to work for the Attorney General's office, so I am very aware of how many days he had off in November because I didn't have them. But I think that if the agencies could help us kind of kickstart something and let it marinate out there for, whether it's a meeting and a comment period or something, it probably doesn't matter that there's so many state holidays there in the interim, however you decide to frame it. But I do agree with what Laura Kiefer has said.
So is there, and we can work around holidays, that I don't mean that to be a deal killer there for doing that. Is there a particular, is the first week in November still too early? The second week, when from a harvest perspective, would we start to be able to gain greater participation from that constituency there?
That's a great question. Maybe our state climatologist can help us because weather is the biggest factor that we have. We know that people are starting harvest in some parts of the state this week or even next. So there's so many factors. We usually err on the side of assuming the weather is going to throw some curveballs and trying to do things after the Thanksgiving holiday. But if November is the date that you have in mind, I think the week ahead, something in the later part of the month would be just a better plan.
I'm wondering, I just kind of wonder if we would get participation that week of Thanksgiving, or if folks are already focused on that holiday on that Thursday and Friday. If we did, do you think that if we went into the week of November 9th, obviously avoiding the Wednesday, the holiday in the middle of the week there for Veterans Day, do you think that's still too early, or will some of the folks have gotten through harvest by that point?
Lauren, another option, could we do the week before Thanksgiving, the week of the 16th?
We could. My problem is I'm I'm scheduled with Great Lakes Commission things for the 17th, 18th, and 19th. But I could see, depending on what schedule works out for those meetings, we might be able to do it that week as well.
I'll just make one more comment that has nothing to do with harvest. The thing that will be consuming a lot of people's time and interest at the beginning of November might be our election. So just something to keep in mind. Finding a way to show your opportunity in the middle of all that might be a little difficult. That's just something out there, but you know, I guess I don't really know about dates in particular. I think later in November or even early December would be a really good time to catch most people in the ag space.
Yeah, so my only question, I guess, is what are we up against on the back end? So is there some something blocking us from doing the first week in December or something like that?
I don't believe there is, right? It's just more, and I guess setting a date and working towards that keeps that momentum there. I just,
Right.
my hesitancy was to delay it so much that, you know, without actions and movement forward, then we lose momentum, some of the momentum we had going into where we were at last spring. So,
Would it be possible to distribute the questionnaire prior to that to keep the momentum going?
sure, that's always a possibility as well.
And Lauren, I'll just interject here. We were a little hesitant to do that because we wanted to give the public a foundation of understanding and knowledge of these 13 issues, and the presentation will essentially do that. And I guess there is the option, well, could you make the presentation available but not hold the virtual meeting at that time? That's another option, but again, one that hasn't received great feedback from our constituents. They'd rather have an opportunity to have an open dialogue about these topics. So our concern was providing that questionnaire too early in advance. They may not really fully comprehend what they're answering questions on. They won't be as knowledgeable about what's occurring, so they won't be able to maybe provide the best feedback.
Right, and my thought was that the questionnaire provided a nice way to, you know, if you were somebody who didn't necessarily enjoy speaking up, especially in a virtual kind of a setting, or having listened to the outreach sessions virtually, you know, maybe it gets your mind thinking, and then you have a thought after it's concluded that you would want to make. And so then the survey gives that opportunity to put that down in writing and submit it to us as a task force for consideration.
Lauren, I'll also jump in it, and it's not really a big deal, but the reason we initially, I think, looked at October is that would allow us to open up that public comment period for, let's say, 30 days and close it, you know, before Thanksgiving. And then we could then distribute that feedback to the issue leads and come back for our early December meeting to discuss those and plan out the next steps with that feedback in hand. If we move the meeting back to early December, that's going to, you know, negate that opportunity. Now, we may just have to redevelop a plan for the December meeting and delay essentially a quarter of activity so that we can get this better feedback. And I'm not opposed to that, but that was the original schedule that we had outlined with the October public meeting in mind.
Couldn't we maybe just move the task force's December meeting into January, just this one time, and And that way we'd be able to allow a longer comment period and.
So if we have a 30-day period where, let's just say that we have, we give the presentation on Tuesday, December 1st, we have 30 days essentially till the end of the calendar year. We could then meet in January, but that doesn't give us a whole lot of time to review the feedback or really prepare any kind of responses to those. So, well, yes, we can. It may cram our schedule a little bit more to prepare and know how we, I guess, decide how we're responding to some of those comments, particularly if they want to drop an issue or add an issue. I saw that next task force as that platform which we would have those discussions.
Is there is 30 days a steadfast number? I'm just, it is the state water plan is, I'm not the ones that have to deal, you guys deal with these comment periods and stuff, but is it worth, a 60-day comment period? And that way, I mean, yeah, it would move our schedule, but I don't know that maybe you guys have requirements I'm not aware of.
I don't think we have those requirements, and I guess I would err on the side of providing more opportunity than less. Folks are still going to make comments towards the end of that comment period by human nature.
It seems that the comments come in right away, or they come in right as the deadline closes, and how much in between time you have between those dates may not be as critical. So I don't know if we need to extend it to 6. I mean, really at that point, you're forgetting what was in the presentation anyways.
Right.
Well, would we send the questionnaire out after let's say a proposed, November 2nd meeting? The 30 days would put it right in the middle of the holidays, so I'm not sure whether the optics look kind of bad that people are going to be pretty distracted. We may not get any comments towards there. Again, this is based on the premise of having a November 1st period there, but or
Well, we could certainly
45 days
go to,
by Martin Luther King's birthday or something, mid-January. That way people can kind of brush off the holidays and still have a couple of weeks to get those last minute things in, something like that. I guess I'm getting kind of married to that first week of, I kept on saying November 2nd, sorry, December 2nd or something like that. Keeps us safe on making sure we can get maximum participation, so.
yeah, I'm comfortable with that too. I because of how holidays impact those things, you're right. Even if we did it mid-November and then said, well, hey, think about it, put in comments, well, then you're into Thanksgiving and then, is it kind of out of sight, out of mind, you moved on. Early December does, get you past those holidays and, still before we get into the end of Christmas and folks taking off extra time through there. So maybe that first week of December becomes a focal point, and then we provide, like you say, maybe 45 days of comments and hold our next task force meeting around that, after we have an opportunity to compile those comments and disseminate them to the task force.
Lauren, I'll let you know. I'm not sure if others are experiencing, but your audio is getting fairly choppy. I'm not sure if anybody else has experienced that or if that's just on my end. So I'm not sure if anything can be done about that, but just a heads up.
I heard you just fine, Lauren.
Okay.
Hey, this is Lauren. I would say that I like that idea of picking a date in early December for lots of reasons that I just said. But that also would give us time to promote the opportunity. And, you know, if a press release could come out of DNR saying, you know, here's the opportunity, I mean, I will speak for the Farm Bureau, we would publicize that to make people aware of it. And sometimes that just takes time. You know, it takes time to put that date on the calendar, promote it, explain to people what it is and the importance for them to pay attention. And we can do that in a way that if we know sooner rather than later when the date is, we can find the best way. It's probably multiple ways to reach people during harvest to let them know about future opportunities. So all I would say is as soon as a date is arrived at, getting the word out sooner rather than later. I love the idea of the comment period as well. People just need time these are big issues and lots of thought could probably be had. And so giving them time to articulate that is important.
Lauren, this is Wes. I have a question, just kind of garnering some feedback. We had mentioned the idea of doing a recorded presentation for, you know, the overarching theme of what we're trying to do. Would it be beneficial, instead of having a live presentation for the entire thing, to have kind of a pre-recorded presentation that becomes available, and then having a live face-to-face Q&A comment type meeting, instead of having the full presentation being all live and all at once? And the reason I throw this question out is that, you know, by the time we go through the background information and then, you know, spend a couple minutes on each of these 13 topics, we could be well into an hour and a half before we get into kind of a Q&A type session, or, you know, kind of more of that back and forth with our constituents. Would it be easier to have a presentation ahead of time available to the public and then have this live session at this set time where you could, you know, go into one of the 13 rooms, depending on which topic you would want to discuss? I guess I'm just trying to get some feedback on what your thoughts would be on, you know, the organization of this virtual outreach.
I'll start, and yeah, I would concur. I like that idea that we would do it as a pre-recorded kind of a session to go through that, you know, with slides and voiceovers, and to go through that, and perhaps on whatever day or days we pick, you know, we could make that available, or run that, you know, starting a particular time. But then really the live part would start, you know, like an hour or something later. So folks could either watch it anytime at their own convenience, or at a predetermined, you know, like if we're going to do it at 1 o'clock, you know, it might start at 1 p.m. and the live session portion of it would start at you know, 2 p.m. or 2:30 or something. So kind of best of both worlds there. And then we really want to have the interaction part. Necessarily, we don't need to occupy everybody's time sitting through an hour or whatever of all of the same information over and over. So I do like that idea. Other thoughts?
Yeah, this is Walt Kelly. I've been in several meetings with the pre-recorded talks and then open for a live question and answer. I think they work really well. You can deal a lot better with technical issues that way too.
Yeah, I would. I guess that's where I'm at. I think that makes sense. And folks have particular questions. They may have questions on their mind even before seeing that that they they want to ask. So I guess that's what I'm hearing, is that we would focus on that first week of December, starting with November 30th through December 4th. We would we could have that that information available. In fact, we could even have that available, shoot for mid-November, to have the presentation out there and available, but not, not have the face-to-face interactive until then, that first full week in December. So if we gave folks, at least a couple of weeks ahead of time, and then or during that first week in December, and then schedule face-to-face times in there. How many face-to-face times do we think as a group is required? Would 2 do it? We were going to do 3, but of course that was physically having to get us to the north, central, and southern part of the state. Do we offer a couple of, I guess 3 times still gives ample opportunity for those, to do that. If we offered 1 in a morning, 1 in the a couple in the afternoon or something, do we do it that way, or do we even do an evening or very late afternoon kind of a session to give ample opportunity for folks to participate?
Lauren, I kind of like that will cut down on the commitment for everybody. We're not talking about a 4-hour commitment for each of these activities. It may be an hour and a half. I can see where it could be beneficial to do, whether it be 2 or 3 different days and at different times. So if Monday doesn't work out for somebody, or if mornings don't work out for somebody, there could be a variety of opportunities. So maybe a Tuesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, and Thursday evening, or that's just an example, but it's just my 2 cents.
Well, that's exactly where my mind was going too, was like a Tuesday morning, a Wednesday afternoon, and a Thursday evening, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of December. And you're right, it does reduce the commitment. The agencies would only be on for that short period for that, question and answer time in there.
But I think it's important that we kind of hear from those 13 lead agencies to see if that would work for them. So feel free to speak up now, so we're not dictating what's going on, and let us know, as this requires effort from a lot of parties.
Well, this is BJ at IDOT. I just checked my calendar, and December 1st, 2nd, 3rd is fine. So.
And this is Rick Cobb. Those times are available. I should have mentioned at the start of the meeting that Mike Brown, the new division manager for Division of Public Water Supplies, is on the WebEx call today. As some of you know, I'm retiring at the end of December. And so I wanted to let you know that. I'm sure I could commit to this. I've actually been doing outreach with the NGOs, and because we put together a draft issue paper on water quality issues, and they had requested meetings, so I had those WebEx meetings, and I'm documenting that input in minutes. So that's it from Illinois EPA. Mike, did you have anything to add? I know this is new to you. Mike's from Idaho. He actually managed the wastewater and drinking water programs in a regional office out in Idaho. So.
No, I didn't have
welcome, Mike.
anything. Thank you. No, I didn't have anything to add.
Well, Rick, you'll definitely be missed. Mike, welcome. I will say if you could send me an email, just respond to, or Rick, if you could provide him my contact just to make sure. As Mike Brown, I might have a couple of those on the state agency list emails. So if you could provide me your contact, I'll make sure I get you in the loop for future communications.
Yes, I can.
And also Mike Summers, the new groundwater section manager that I hired, will be involved today, but they were busy because they have their last meeting before we're going to implement the statewide per and polyfluoroalkyl substances sampling. Is going to, some of you may have seen the press release, but we're going to start that sampling next week. So Mike got excused from this call. And, you know, Sanjay also knows he knows that I have kind of represented drinking water, groundwater, and Clean Water Act stuff. So he may choose somebody from the Clean Water Act side of the fence to participate as well. So just FYI.
And I do, yeah, first of all, congratulations, Rick, on getting to that milestone. I'm jealous. But I do think in this outreach, we will hear a lot on drinking water and probably the water rates issue and the social justice issues surrounded by water supply and water rates and lead pipes and that whole gambit. So I thoroughly expect to hear quite a bit of feedback during this first outreach on the water quality side of things.
Well, and you know, I sent you the final minutes for the water quality issues where we, you know, we're getting input from some of the NGOs. Of course, I have a direct pipeline with being the chair of the state interagency coordinating committee on groundwater and the liaison to the governor's groundwater advisory council, as well as being on the public water supply advisory board. So, you know, a lot of our issues are, you know, we have statutory stakeholders that we obtain a whole host of input from, but in those sessions, those additional sessions that we did with the NGOs, we captured some additional thoughts and ideas for consideration. And I'm sure that could be presented to, you know, at this next phase of getting outreach. So it'll be triple, double, and quadruple outreach on some of these water issues by the time we get done. So.
Right. I see in the chat there's a suggestion of a doodle poll. I don't. Do we need to do a doodle poll, or are we early enough in folks scheduling that we could just set like a 10 a.m., a 2 p.m., and a 5 p.m. Time period on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of December? Thoughts on that?
I think my calendar's pretty open right now. I don't know about others, but.
Yeah, I said mine is open. Yeah, the sooner you send out a meeting notice, the less likely that it gets filled in with something else. So I'm good with whatever you want to do.
Well, I think let's go that direction.
Lauren, the other concern.
Go ahead.
Lauren, the other concern is the logistics of how we're going to make this work. I wonder about having, do we have 13 separate meetings occurring at each of those times, each hosted by the lead agency or the lead individual, rather than trying to have, everybody in one room? I know that there's some programs that can do breakout rooms, but usually you have to pre-register for those. I guess I'm just opening up the discussion on logistically how we want to set up this virtual face-to-face discussion.
I'd like to point out too, I understand the logistics issues, but the one thing that I think has been obvious through these critical issues is there's a lot of overlap between the issues, and to separate them out would stifle some of that conversation and continuity between the topics.
I will say that we've had there was input on those cross-cutting issues. I think Wes sat in on the funding call we had with the NGOs, and they were bringing that up. But I will mention that we had done groundwater protection policy forums. Probably most of you are too young to have participated in those. But what we did is there was a little bit of the presentation in the beginning, and then there were the breakout sessions depending on different topic areas that you were interested in. And then there was a coming back together to talk about, kind of, you could sort of see maybe a cross cut between those breakout sessions. So, I don't remember how many of those groundwater protection policy forums we've done over the years, at least 2 or 3, and that's the way we did those. And I think we actually did reports to document those. But yeah, there's definitely cross-cutting issues.
This is Tara, and I had an idea, sort of like parent-teacher conference, where you have a few sessions, because I am concerned, like Laura, that someone might want to go into more than one of those 13 critical areas. And if you had maybe a time A and a B, that would allow someone to be able to hit both rooms.
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't know if we'd have kind of an open house type style for entering these rooms, and that, well, maybe we make the discussion period an hour and a half long or whatever, so they could hop between multiple sessions. Aside from having a bunch of random sessions throughout the day, and I guess that's option number 2, is that you could have all 13 sessions just set up whatever time they wanted on those 3 days, but that becomes very difficult to manage as well.
Or do we say like a 2-hour time segment there, and do we group, maybe we have during that first hour, maybe we group issues together, right? And so if you're interested in these 4 issues, you go to this room, or these 4 issues, you go to this room, and then, like you say, you offer that a couple of 2 or 3 times during that first hour, and then the second hour, or maybe we have to do that for 90 minutes, and then but the last part we come together and the leads kind of report out what was discussed in those kind of sessions individually, and then you have that group discussion or group sharing of what was discussed and brought forward in those a little more grouped or clustered issue discussion areas. because I would agree that, you might really have something that you want to share and talk about related to water quality, but then you may really have a big interest in what happened in navigation, and you're interested to hear what others said about integrated water management, so what do folks think of that? Well, I kind of am leery of doing 13 separate breakout rooms. Just for it just seems kind of
Unmanageable.
unmanageable. Yeah, to try and do that. Where I like that idea of kind of a 2-hour period where we have a little more grouped or focused breakout rooms, and then we all come together in that large format to have a report out and see what discussion that generates.
So Lauren, you're talking about a 2-hour block for the individual rooms, followed by a 1-hour or something like that, follow-up of a summarization of each of those groups where we all come back together for a total of, 2.5 or 3 hours.
Yeah, that works in person. I'm not sure how long we can keep folks' attention on that for 3 hours. Sounds a bit long.
Yeah, this is Lauren Lurkins. I would just say the thing that we're learning in forcing our agricultural community to do everything virtual is that we cannot duplicate the in-person meeting. And we're having our own struggles with that, including our annual meeting that will be the first weekend of December. We can't keep people's attention for that long. So they have in some cases, just connection issues from an internet perspective, but also lots of things going on. I'm sure that's the same with lots of people these days. So I like the idea of discussion. I think in some way it almost needs to be a presentation that comes from multiple agency staff in some fashion. And then really the comment period is a time that you can rely on to allow the additional thought to come forward. I just don't know that you're going to be able to do it in a meaningful way in a virtual format. That's my own personal opinion based on what we've been seeing.
Right, and I would tend to agree with that, and I think that's where the value comes in with the survey or a comment period that follows that. That lets you still get in. So right now we're just, I think, talking about offering opportunity. And so for those that really would like to take advantage of that opportunity or have an opportunity to engage virtually or be heard in that manner, I'm thinking of really no more than a 2-hour time slot. Perhaps we break have 3 different clusters of issues, and each issue goes 30 minutes. If you can't, you would have to pick 2 of the 3 that you want to engage in, or I guess you can back out and join one, in progress. But I think we have 3 clusters going during that first hour and come back with reports out and a sharing that second hour. And that would be after folks have already watched the presentation and heard the information. And then at the end, we encourage folks to, if you didn't get to hear all, we're going to do it again tomorrow at this time or something, or you're always welcome to go back and review the pre-recorded session, and you're welcome to provide comments during this follow-up comment period, or always welcome to reach out to the agency leads in particular if there's really something that you want to address. But as a task force, here's our 3 opportunities for virtual interaction, and then here's our time period for comments. And then we have the information out there ahead of time. I like maybe the idea of having a presentation out there and available starting that mid-November period, with then the virtual happening that first week of December. and a comment period going through January 15th. And then we are able to disseminate those comments and feedback immediately after that to the task force. What do folks think of that kind of a layout?
I like that.
Sounds pretty good.
Then we would need to talk about really that pre-recorded session. We would need to have that together if we want to have that hit the streets mid-November, along with press releases like Lauren has suggested, which I think is a great idea. You know, to get that word out starting about the beginning of November. Then we're really looking at needing to have our presentation together probably by the end of October. So then I think I don't know, Wes, if we move on to kind of the sample, do we have a sample slide there or of what we were looking at in kind of a pre-recorded? So here, what you see on the screen now is Wes's draft of what he put together for the water sustainability issue. Right, here's the issue. In the first bold text, that's kind of what do we mean by the title water sustainability? What does that include, or what are we saying when we say water sustainability? And then beneath that is a listing of here's kind of the subtopics that we have. And of course, this first initial outreach is to see, you know, is that first bolded type there? Is there something that we've missed there, or does that cover it from your perspective? And then here's the subtopics underneath that. Is there one that shouldn't be there or one that should be added? That's really the level for this first engagement and outreach that we're at. I think it's a task force. And so we would ask each agency lead to each agency really to develop a slide like this, and then perhaps have that audio voiceover that explains what folks are seeing on the slide, and then we would put all those together as the pre-recorded presentation from the task force. Any questions or comments on that?
Would we be summarizing essentially the what we're the documents that we're creating right at the moment, essentially just, like you said, defining and, you know, the background of how water, in this example, water sustainability, excuse me, has been approached in the state of Illinois recently, and then there we go. Okay, you're answering my question, Wes. So, would we also be then presenting recommendations, or that is going to come like after comment periods?
That would come after. That would be the second outreach effort that we would do in 2021. So I think the main focus here is here's the issues that we've identified, and here's what we mean by those issues, and here's some of these are the subtopics that fall under those issues that we would like to address in the water plan. Have we missed something? Have we misinterpreted something? You know, is something in there that shouldn't be, or that should be combined with something else? That's, I think, the kind of feedback that we're looking for from the stakeholders and from the public to get that confirmation, and then that gives us, I think, as a task force, more confidence moving into then the development and of those topics and issues and recommendations or directions from that.
And Lauren, if I could, I'll just explain, you know, if there's anything that we want to change with the format of this slide, we can discuss that. But essentially, all I would need from each lead for the topic is the PowerPoint slide and then a audio file. An example, I just used my my cell phone to record the audio talking over. It can be multiple pieces, just as long as you appropriately annotate the recording files, and then just send that all to me, and I can combine everything for the final presentation. So again, I just need this one slide. If we like this format, I think it's good to remain consistent in the slides so that we can, so the viewer, I guess, can follow what's kind of being described as we go through the 13 issues. And then, you know, have that voiceover. We wanted to kind of keep that at 2 minutes maximum per topic. Since we have 13 of those, that'll take us well over a half an hour to go through those 13 topics if we limit it to 2 minutes. So we really didn't want to get into a 5-minute slide, as I'm sure we probably could as we try and talk about this, but it's just an expanding of what these identified issues are, maybe a brief discussion on what the topic really means, you know, defining it, and then a brief discussion on what these identified issues really mean, or expanding on them. If you guys have any question.
One comment I know, just on the format of the slide you provided that had the kind of border lines on the left and on the bottom. As I tried to work on a slide for my issue topic, that did kind of restrict what I could do or how I placed text. So slide format wise, that we might want to think about whether we want the kind of those lines as you have in there as a formatted slide. The other question I guess I would have is that, you know, would we allow 2 slides? Again, we don't want to spend 5 minutes on an issue necessarily, so that we don't have a long drawn out presentation that we get folks to lose interest in. But if folks really couldn't get everything on one slide, would we allow 2 slides then?
Yeah, Wes, this is Joe Jones.
Well, that makes much. Go ahead, Joe. I apologize.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is Joe Jones. I'm with IEMA. I'm filling in for Scott Galvin and Scott Swinford. And just a question on this slide for developing the other slide. So you talk about the 13 topics, and obviously I'm new on this briefing here. So when we talk about 13 topics, I mean, is there another slide that goes along with this about those 13 topics?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the question. I guess my audio is breaking up a little bit.
Well, let me try it again.
I'll jump in and say, yeah, that we would, Joe, there would be probably a bit of a setup, or there would be a slide that does show all of the issues before we go into each one individually. And there would be a little bit of that, you know, who and what we are, why we're doing this, where we're headed in a briefing. We don't want to repeat, you know, presentations that we've done before, but there would be a bit of an intro to these individual topic slides.
Exactly. And so for like developing for like IEMA, one of those 13 topics, I mean, for like to develop that slide for IEMA, there's got to be something that IEMA would go off of, correct?
I'll address this, Lauren. Yeah, so each of the 13 topics had a lead agency and a lead individual within that agency assigned. And at the time, IEMA wasn't in attendance, so IEMA would not have a slide to prepare, as they're not a lead for any of the 13 topics.
All right, thank you. That's the answer I needed. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other comments or concerns about slide layout or what would be expected from each lead agency? I guess I would suggest a October 30th deadline. Does that give us enough time, Wes, if we're looking to pull this together by mid-November?
Yeah, I think so. As long as I don't get any big assignments from my director at that time.
No promises. No promises. So if we can have
And we can start taking those now. There's no need to wait till October 30th either. I know some of you have started sending me, you know, at least a start of these slides. We can start pulling this together now, and that'll make it a little easier than getting everything all together all on the 30th. So because that is the deadline, you don't have to wait till the last moment.
And Lauren, if you're still on, would you be willing to perhaps work with Rachel and draft up kind of a press release that we could start working on reviewing and getting that, so we're comfortable with that press release by October 30th?
I'm not a press expert, but I would be happy to look at what she puts together. She knows, you know, a slightly dated use of that content for farm purposes. So I'm sure she'll do a great job. I don't need to get involved in it, but whenever she's got a working draft, I'd be happy to look at it.
Okay.
And again, I think, and we kind of talked about this offline, whatever day that was, but I think it's important to the general public. Sorry for my 5-year-old here in the office with me. I think it's important for the general public to understand, obviously, this opportunity for public engagement, but also a plan ahead. I mean, you guys have been doing a good job of explaining the plan as it existed pre-COVID in individual meetings. But I do think the press release, to the degree that it can speak to, here's one opportunity out of a whole set of opportunities and what the grand plan is. That's going to be just, our guys go to logistics quite a bit. So I think that would be important for people as they're figuring out the importance of this first thing. To me, they may write it off if it's just like, tell us what topics. I think understanding the full context is important. But a short answer is I'd be happy to work with Rachel on all that.
That's a great idea, Lauren. We'll and I'll talk with Rachel, and we'll figure a plan forward, and we'll definitely have that kind of a layout in the pre-recorded part of the presentation as well, and in the intro to our virtual. All right, any other thoughts on the slides and the outreach? I think we have a general plan together to go forward. Again, you can reach out to Wes or I if you've got questions that come up while you're in the midst of doing that. So I don't know, do we want to move on the agenda now? Do we have any updates on how things are coming on the issue areas?
Just so you know, I've received a couple of the issue slides. I've known that there has been some public outreach efforts on multiple of these issues or committee meetings, but that's all I have on my end. I've only received a couple of these slides that we talked about putting together. It sounds like we got some more time to pull those together as we're kind of pushing back the date of the public outreach meeting, but I guess unless there's anybody who wants to share anything that's going on specifically within their committee.
For stream data management, we're I could be winding up our problem narrative in the next couple weeks. We're getting close.
Okay, this is Dave Kristovich for the climate change section. We're still working on getting our first draft out. We have a complete draft, but I've got some really useful comments from Wes and Tom and others, and just addressing those. And so we're well underway.
Yeah, this is BJ Murray with IDOT. Yeah, we are undertaking our Illinois Marine Transitional System Plan, which should be finalized in sometime in November. So I've taken some of that information to develop my slide and my talking point. So hope to share that with Wes soon.
I just have a quick question. Rick, is Mike Brown going to be taking over the water quality section of this effort? Is that the plan?
Well, I mean, it kind of depends on the logistics here. We've already got our issues developed, and as you know, because we have the ICC, GAC, Drinking Water Advisory Board, and Sanjay runs the clean water programs in Illinois, we sort of have a pretty good list of the issues. So I don't know if, I can expect Mike just to dive right into this. I mean, you're wanting slides and audios right now of the topics that we've already developed. So I'm not just going to foist that off onto Mike. I know that's not really what you were asking, but.
Yeah, I was more worried about come January 1, who's going to be the point of contact.
Yeah, I won't be here January 1, so yeah, you can talk to Mike on that one, sure, if that's what you meant.
Yeah, I was more looking at come January 1, particularly if we're not having a December meeting. This may be Rick's final State Water Plan Task Force meeting.
Could be.
Well, I don't know. Retirees need to find somewhere to volunteer, right? To keep their time occupied.
Yeah, I can see you on the camera, Lauren. I'm looking right at you. You got a camera on your computer. I don't have mine on, so I'm sure I can find some. I'm sure I know how to fill up my time. No, but yeah, no, that's why I wanted to get Mike on board. But yeah, if that's what you mean, yeah, in January, or unless Mike decides to have somebody else involved, or Sanjay does. I mean, it's not really up to me.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure whoever kind of steps in that place of that task force member, even going forward beyond this report update, that we make sure we have a line of communication with them.
Right, but like I said, Mike Summers would have been on the call as well, but he's got other water issues that are actually happening, and with the PFAS, and like I also said, Sanjay may want to add a clean water person, because I've been around long enough to be able to cover both areas, but he may want to have a groundwater drinking water person and or a clean water person. That's why I said that in the beginning.
This is Tara for the flood damage mitigation group. We've been meeting, we've had a few committee meetings, and we're just paring down our list. We have too many issues, which maybe all of you guys are dealing with at the same time. But we did find some issues that we felt other groups might be able to handle, or it made more sense. So I think I'll send those around again and just find out. We understand that each group is coming up with their own ideas, and something related to flooding might not really be the top of your list, but just watch for my email. And if it's something you guys are already addressing in your group, or you do see that it's important and makes more sense in your group, just let me know.
Lauren, would this be a good opportunity to discuss cross-cutting issues?
I think so. I think that was a nice segue into that. Go ahead, Wes, if you want to.
Well, I don't know if I had anything in particular, but Tara kind of mentioned it. I know other issues such as climate change really had a battle with this, is where their line clearly divides them from just about every other section in the proposed report. So, you know, I see this now as if any of the issue leads have any questions regarding cross-cutting issues as it may come into theirs or another, it may be a good opportunity to discuss it. And just for an example, with climate change, you know, there's a discussion on, well, you know, climate change really impacts almost all these, but we'll take flood damage for an example. You know, increased rainfall leads to more flood damages. Is that being accounted for in climate change, or is that being accounted for in the flood damage mitigation? And kind of the direction I provided them is that, well, what research or efforts need to go underway to give the tools needed to the flood damage mitigation section. So, you know, for them, it's kind of more stopping at the weather aspect of the additional precipitation aspect. And then, you know, the flood damage mitigation may kind of start, you know, after the water is on the ground. So that's just an example of, well, there may be issues that kind of cut across multiple issues that we have laid out, and just making sure that we are all coordinating to have clear defined roles. And this may be a good topic if there's other ones that may need to be mentioned.
Yeah, thank you, Wes. This is Dave about the climate change section. Yes, you're right. We've been kind of struggling on what should be in our section of the plan and what should go into the other sections. And the approach we're taking at the moment is that topics that are specific to each of these other topics, such as Lake Michigan, such as you know, they could consider putting a climate change bullet point in theirs, and this particular section would be an overview and covering a few topics that aren't specifically covered by other sections. But I'm open to however anyone wants to suggest approaching it.
This is Lauren. I like the idea of that, you know, the climate change being its own issue there, and kind of defining and outlining what that all includes, such that when you get to one of the other topic areas, it'd almost be like, okay, well, so given those aspects that were defined and discussed in climate change, here's how, you know, here's the issues created within this focus area or this issue so they're not repeating that. I guess at this point, I still kind of like the idea of not having cross-cutting issues identified maybe as such. You know, in specific, well, this is cross-cutting issue 1 and this is cross-cutting issue 2, so much as having the individual chapters of these issues and describing some of the cross-cutting nature of that issue within that chapter. What do folks think about that?
Lauren, I kind of agree with you. I put in the chat that the 1984 plan had a cross-cutting issues section, and it was kind of had this demarcation of, you know, what they were. So, you know, maybe as everybody gets done with their, or at least a reasonable draft, we should be passing around to everybody, and we may have to have sidebar discussions between groups to determine what those cross-cutting issues are, and then be deliberately writing to complement each chapter on those topics. It's going to be some additional work, but that seems to be the more, I was going to say elegant, but just, you know, the best way to show how these things do fit together.
That's exactly my thoughts too, Laura. And I mean, it's almost integrated water management in action, if you will, of that kind of collaborated effort to complement each of the chapters on those issues.
I mean, maybe since climate change seems to be the biggest and obvious one that's crossing over everybody, Dave, are you guys ready to at least share a draft with all the other 12 groups, and we can start thinking about that now?
No, not quite yet, because there's still some pretty major reorganization changes that I'd like to do in response to some of the comments we've gotten within the group. But I will try to get something out, you know, soon, so that everyone has a chance to look at it and consider how and if they want to cover any of those in other sections. So that's great.
Well, maybe then within everybody's chapters, at least just between the task force, everybody just put their thinking caps on and saying, hey, you know, I think, you know, we cross-cut with navigation because of this, and kind of just make a laundry list so that when we share between one another, we've already done a preliminary identification of where we cross-cut and then can work from there.
Right. I think that sounds like a reasonable approach to doing that, or going forward that way. Like you say, it becomes a more, has some finesse to the report if we're able to accomplish that. The other issue I would bring up that, you know, of course, the governor's office, the lieutenant governor's office definitely want to see the social and environmental justice components weaved into these chapters. And so, you know, as you're developing these issues and subtopics and thinking about how, you know, equity and diversity and so forth are impacted, or how that would weave into issues related to how that's done. You know, in my own, excuse me, in my own issue that I'm leading, you know, with the integrated water management, it's kind of, well, as we work to communicate and collaborate better as a unified group of agencies, you know, how are we engaging and including those, you know, providing an equity of inclusion, and how are we including those stakeholders that could be impacted, or, you know, the people of color. And so I'm just here as the chair to kind of reinforce and reiterate that the this administration is looking for that kind of flavoring throughout these chapters as it fits and as is appropriate. So that becomes kind of another cross-cutting issue of equity in programs and diversity and engagement of all the peoples of Illinois. So keep that in mind as we continue to develop the chapters and define how these issues go forward. Any other issue lead updates or comments? Otherwise, I think we're probably ready to move forward into reviewing our schedule and talking about how we get into next steps then. So I do like the plan we've laid out for the outreach, which then gets us looking at what those comments and feedback were in that late January, early February timeframe. Then I think we transition from that based on what we've heard and discussed then into the issue development. Are we looking to try to have that done perhaps early summer, late spring of 2021? What are folks' thoughts on that? To have, I guess I would say that with then another outreach then in early summer to share that, be focused on the draft report that we would want to then do our final outreach in late summer, early fall, and then have a goal of perhaps towards the end of 2021 to actually be submitting and publishing the report about a year later than we originally intended, but we didn't intend the COVID impacts either. So I guess I would throw that out there for a starting discussion on a overall long-range schedule.
Lauren, one question I would have is I guess, are we going to get into a planting season in the spring? And I guess, Lauren, I assume you're still on, if there's a time that we should maybe try and stay away from, if there's some time in April or something that's typically bad for planting season, we can try and prevent having a clashing schedule with that.
Yeah, we're right back into that conflict. I think, I'm always just coming from transparency to as many stakeholders. I just happen to work for agriculture. So I want to tell you about those major conflicts for like maybe a month and a half to 2 month period. But overall, it's just transparency about the process and opportunities to weigh in for lots of different groups. But yeah, spring planting will be another thing. And again, I'm going to turn to the state climatologist to tell us what that looks like. But it can last a month to get the state top to bottom. We tried to stay away from that too, and I can give you a little bit more indication as we get a little bit closer. But generally, yeah, April is out.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I think we would want to try to have that next round of outreach before we got into really before the end of school year, perhaps. Definitely think we want to avoid that planting season for the same reason we're trying to avoid the harvest season. But before we got into maybe the main part of summer and folks turning their attention to other activities. Probably wanted to get in that period and then work the finalization of those recommendations or actions based on the feedback that we got then before the end of the school year in 21 into that final draft report for, again, the late summer of 21. So we probably, Wes, do we need to then figure out kind of a new future meeting schedule, or if we're looking at that, the outreach now being that first week of December, do we still want to have a December meeting, or are we better shifting everything into early February and making shifts accordingly from that?
Unless there's some topics that we want to discuss prior to getting that feedback, I'm not sure if there's anything else that we need to discuss prior to then. But it looks like we'll definitely need to have a meeting in February. I would guess would be the earliest time. I mean, we could do late January, but it's going to be right around that time frame.
Well, why don't Wes and I will work to develop that future meeting schedule and get that out for comment to the task force and help you get those on your calendars for 2021 here.
Yeah, I'll put that together, and then essentially we can come up with this new report schedule, knowing that we're going to move forward with either in-person or virtual public meetings in the future, whichever we're allowed to do, but we're not going to hold back waiting for face-to-face opportunities. We'll move forward with the virtual if needed. So with that, we can relay out this whole new schedule.
Thank you. Other comments, topics, or concerns while we're gathered together as a task force today?
I had a quick comment. I saw in the chat that Laura mentioned that we would probably need a written script for our slides. So I just was wondering, the reason I bring it forward now, is there a way when you're recording your slide narrative to have closed caption enabled, or should each group plan to write their written or write out what they say on the slide? It would be good to know going in before we have to fix it later.
Yeah, I'm not aware about closed captioning. I'd have to look into that. I don't know, Wes, do you know any more about that, or anybody else?
Oh, I'm not aware of it. I mean, anytime we've held public outreach meetings in a live format, it has not had any kind of closed captioning included with it. So because we're recording, could we allow, I wouldn't even know how to incorporate it. If somebody else does, I guess feel free to speak up if you've done anything like that before in any public hearings or public outreach efforts. I'm guessing not.
Hey, Wes, that might be something your comms people can help you with. When we work with other state agencies, in particular, I'm thinking about Department of Ag, they're very concerned about not just that closed captioning, but also languages. I don't know if they were getting guidance from the governor's office that it needed to be accessible for everyone there. So that might just be something to think about, particularly with Lauren's comments on making sure you reach certain communities. I don't have the answer. I just know that it was an issue for them.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. I should mention that the survey that's been prepared has been prepared in both English and Spanish. That thought had crossed my mind of, okay, how do you do that with, with the presentation, to, convert audio to a bilingual. That could probably be explored. I'd have to see how we do that. If we did have scripts prepared, could that be that we had just a, somebody that was able to do that with a narrator or something in another language that could prepare that as well. We can explore that.
Do we utilize a program that automatically does a closed caption if we don't have that capability ourselves, such as using or utilizing a YouTube channel of the departments that does have that automatic closed caption system built into it?
Well, I think we can certainly explore that and see what our capabilities are or aren't. But I guess if we did, that goes back to, the comment, if there is a script prepared that would go along with, say, the audio recording that you would make for each of the issue slides, that would allow for perhaps at least a narrator to be able to do that in Spanish or another language to, again, show that ability to try and be inclusive and equitable in how we're trying to reach all stakeholders.
Is that something Rachel could help us with? Do they do that for other agency communications?
Well, that's where I was going to start and see if she knew how to do that and or knew of others who could help us that way.
The other thing is I know WebEx has a transcript function, correct, Tara, that we use for capturing minutes with all these meetings. So, that's another way to grab all the text as well if you want to automate the process.
True.
So I think we can explore that and see what we can come up with on our end.
Any other comments or concerns or issues that we want to discuss today as a task force? Thank you for your attentiveness as we worked through that and created a plan to go forward with our outreach and keep the ball rolling. Appreciate all that. All right, well, hearing none, again, we'll look to hear from us on terms of a new meeting schedule outline. In the meantime, be thinking and working on those presentations, the slides for the presentation, so we can be working on developing that. I believe we have or soon can be sharing the questionnaire that will be going out in its final form, so the task force can have kind of a preview of what we have together for a questionnaire as well. I think we've gotten a few comments back on that and have taken that into consideration, but we can be sharing that going forward as well. So with that, thank you everybody for your participation and your time, and enjoy this nice sunny day in Illinois. So thank you everybody, and take care.
Bye.
Thanks, Lauren.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.